Hi again. I've just produced a video talking about how to strengthen the lungs and the 6 steps course, which an online course which I'm beginning tomorrow night. And somebody asked a very good question about inherited diseases, and there's something that I really want to kind of clear up around, which illnesses are inherited and which aren't, because there's a lot of confusion coming from Western medicine around this. So she asked a question. I have some friends who have hay fever and I think she said hay fever and asthma. I can't quite remember. Two lung problems, and they're saying that they've got it because they've inherited it. Is this true? And I'm saying no, this is not true. These are lifestyle caused illnesses. So definitely some illnesses are inherited, where there's a change in the DNA, and that has unfortunate consequences for people. So there's a whole number of definitely inherited problems, and if you have certain genes, gene changes, identifiable gene changes, then you are usually definitely or much more likely to develop certain illnesses. However, there's this big range of illnesses which have been called inherited diseases, which really aren't. Western medicine, because it takes a very detailed look at things, is very keen on looking at genetics and the gene causes of health problems. Okay, very useful, but actually be far more useful, and they would really, we discover the causes of health problems to a much greater extent if they took the bigger picture, which Oriental medicine and other forms of medicine take. Let's start off by looking at people's food, lifestyle, emotions, activity levels, socialization, how much support they get, stress levels, etc. Because this is what causes 95% of illness. It's these lifestyle factors rather than genes. So a couple of confusions. One is people think, well, if I've got a certain illness in my family, my father had hay fever, and then my uncle did, and some of the grandparent, they all had hay fever, therefore I'm getting hay fever, therefore it must be inherited. There's an assumption made, even in Western medicine, that if something's running in a family, perhaps it's inherited. So an alternative reason why that could be is that hay fever is caused by certain lifestyles, maybe by certain environmental factors, and definitely by certain foods. And people tend, and also certain emotional patterns, and people tend to inherit the emotional patterns, food habits, etc., of their parents and their families. If you're eating the same foods as your parents, if you have the same lifestyle habits, maybe lack of exercise, the same kind of environment, and so on, then of course you're going to develop the same imbalances in the body, and then you're more likely to suffer from that same health problem. So I was talking about lungs a few minutes ago. If one is drinking lots of Coca-Cola in the family and eating lots of processed foods and not exercising, then much more likely to get lung problems. And if that's what the parents are doing and that's what the children start doing, then the children also, parents have hay fever, have asthma, bronchitis, then the children, if they keep those kind of eating and life habits, are much more likely to develop those problems as well. So don't assume that just because things seem to run in your family or someone's family, that it must be genes. It can very much be lifestyle. It can also be emotional patterns. Unfortunately, we get emotional patterns, well, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, whatever the emotional patterns our parents and maybe grandparents had, they're often passed down to the children and the grandchildren. And in emotional counseling, psychotherapy, this is very well recognized. One has a pattern of not nourishing oneself and then wanting to eat a lot of sugar, eating a lot of sweet foods in order to feel nourished. And then maybe this is what one's mother did, and maybe that's what her mother did, and maybe even her mother going back. This emotional habit gets passed down, and then that creates the same eating habit, eating lots of sweet foods, eating a lot of sugary foods, which maybe are harmful for the lungs and certain other organs, maybe also contributing to blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes or overweight and insulin resistance, etc. So can also be for emotional patterns getting passed down. Then Western medicine has really been doing a lot of research into looking for the genetic causes of illness, and they're coming up and they're saying, well, if you have certain genes, then what they often say is you're more likely to develop a certain problem, such as breast cancer. But what it's often taken as is it's the genes that are causing the breast cancer or some other problem, and therefore, if you have those genes, it's almost inevitable, or there's a high chance that you're going to develop those problems. And this is untrue. It's a half truth, because what they're not saying is there's a lot of lifestyle factors which also contribute to breast cancer or many other illnesses. And therefore, you may have certain genes. And of course, we all vary genetically. And of course, we're all going to have certain strengths and certain weaknesses in us. But very often, whether those health problems manifest depends on people's diet, lifestyle, emotional makeup, stress levels, environment, etc. So it's not an inevitability just because you have genes which make it more likely you'll develop a certain illness that you will manifest that problem. As I said at the beginning, there are genetic diseases where there are changes in the genes, and people do, either at birth or later in life, it's almost inevitable they're going to develop certain diseases. But these are, more unusual. Then there are a pretty small proportion of kind of diseases known to humankind. So, for me, this is a very positive outlook, because what I've always been about, and macrobiotics has always been about, is empowering people to take care of their own health and play a big part in determining their own life and having a really fulfilling, creative, and vital life. And the other problem with attributing things to genes and being inevitable is it can be pretty depressing and disempowering. Of course, we need to face the truth, not hide from the truth. I'm not into hiding from the truth, but even if we have genes which give us a higher chance of developing a certain health problem, then even more reason to look at our diet, our lifestyle, our emotional healing, etc., to get ourselves more healthy, and then we're lessening our chances of that disease ever coming up. So I hope that clarifies things a bit. I love Western science. I love Western medicine. It has a fantastic understanding, but it has some blind spots. Of course, any system has blind spots, and this is one of its blind spots, I feel, because it's so focused on genes, and until very recently, it hasn't been focusing on the big picture. If you want to understand illness, 95%, I'm convinced after seeing people with many different illnesses over 40 years, 95% of illnesses are caused by our diet and lifestyle. And of course, genetic and other factors play a small part, but this is where the main cause is. Okay, I hope that's been useful. If you've got any questions about this, actually it'd be a good subject to do a longer talk on sometime. If you've got any questions, then type them in and I'll see if I can get to answering them sometime soon. Okay, thanks.